So this is number 3
The 3?
at YouTube, and we were just talking about agendas. So I had an agenda today. Somebody I got a request to talk about recurring dreams, and I want to interview Bill to say, why are you doing this, Bill? How did you get to where you are? Because you focus on my medical story, but you have an interesting story. Why would anybody do what we're doing? Does that sound okay, Bill?
That sounds great.
You're giving me control to do a little bit of what I want.
We had this idea of, kind of having a program calling ourselves the Dream Bros. So, to me, part of being bros is like we're brothers in this project. And
I'm up for the dialogue, and since we've talked last, there's been some feedback of things we can talk about in dreams, and there's like sent you a bit of a list this morning. Somebody wants to know. My wife Beth says, "What about fear in dreams?" People want to know about that, and the recurring dreams is something that my friend Marlo has said. Talk about those, and
okay.
but I wanna start with what brought Bill. How did you get here? And if you can focus on a bit of outer world, we talk about inner world, outer world, and we talked about that last time. But the fact that you started as a plumber occupationally, amongst other things,
Yeah. Not amongst other things. I was a plumber.
but
That's
yeah,
what I
can
did.
you tell me about that? How did you, like, why did this take importance? What we're doing right now, when I mean, plumbing's important, right? You need plumbing. How did you
I
get here,
mean,
Bill?
the plumbing thing's interesting. I fell into the plumbing because I was looking for work and I like doing physical labor. I talked last time a little bit about, I also have a thing about fixing things and making things better. So it lined up with that part of who I am. And I still like to do physical projects, but it was never, my heart was never in it in the way that my heart is in this work. And, part of it, I also fell into this. I was in a point where I was having a bit of a really sweet midlife crisis, I guess you could call it, except it wasn't really a crisis. It was really more like a midlife opening. And I think I was recovering. I don't know if I've talked on the channel here with you about my brother dying when I was 17. And, I think I went through, God, it was probably 20 years of, in a way, being pretty lost. I was telling my brother Steve about this just the other day. Like, he was my main person in the family. I was closer to him than anybody. I followed him to the high school he went to. I was following him to college, went to college a month after he died, with the hope of being with him. And went on this 20-year, I don't know, it was a journey. It wasn't all bad. I don't want to like dismiss that part of my life, but I wandered in some ways that were healthy, in some ways that were just like, I was just overwhelmed. I was in a bit of PTSD, I think, from Robert dying and not really knowing what to do with my life. And I think I started having a bit of some kind of awakening midlife, like I said, midlife exploration. And I started, I had this super intense dream that we talked about in the last video. And when I did that session and I had that experience of being the boy in the water, that was like a feeling that I had not felt for those last 20 years. I think that was a feeling I felt when Robert was alive. I think that was a feeling, it's interesting. I never thought about the fact that it was two boys underwater. And I've never thought about it like as me and my brother, because we were a little bit almost like twins, for me anyway, maybe less so for him because I was like the younger brother, the tag along brother. But for me, it was like I always just wanted to be Robert's twin. And yeah, it was, and so when I worked that dream and I felt that, you talk about a psychedelic trip, it just transformed my life in some way. I kind of felt some kind of peace inside myself that I hadn't felt for 20 years. And I was sort of like, I'm in whatever this weird dream thing is that I had never, I was someone who had never paid attention to my dreams. I had a few dreams when I was like sort of nightmarish dreams when I was in high school. not like horror nightmare, but like running up these stairs and falling and just like talk about recurring dream. And I think it was a recurring dream where I'd be running up these stairs and I would just like fall on my face. And then the dream would start all over again. So I did that and it blew my mind open, blew my heart open. And I was in and I just followed it and then took classes with the people who you and I started out with, started having my own clients, um, and it felt super helpful for me. And the part of me that actually, I think the genuine part of me that wanted to help people, it was a way to feel the kind of love that I felt with Robert with other people. And that was something I mean, it's not like I felt none of it, but something opened in me where it was like, oh, I could feel that kind of innocence and love again. And it was just like the main thing I wanted to do. I kept doing the plumbing because I needed the money. And it's not so easy to start a business as a dream practitioner, but I slowly built up the dream practice and built my life around it. And here I am, still building my life around it.
It's notable that I asked about plumbing and you just took a tangent towards your brother, which is thanks for the vulnerability of sharing that. And I often say to people, you'll often a feeling memory will take you off on a tangent and permission to go with that tangent because that's likely more closer to the meaning of the dream or what it is you need to process to move you forward to live a more fulfilling life, whatever that is for you. And you just took a tangent with your story with your brother. So thank you. It's um so I listened to the Rob cast. I like that podcast. One of the things he says is there are no tangents. It's the tangents is where the meat is sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the whole dream thing began with that for me. So yeah, it's not really a tangent for me. It's kind of at the heart of why I do this work. I mean, I think when Robert died, it made me want to find meaning in this world. And I think I spent 20 years struggling to find that meaning. And then when I started working with dreams with myself and then with other people, I started to find meaning. I was like, wow, this is like worth living for. This is like, there's a kind of love here in the work that we do with dreams that really struggled to find.
So it changed your life for the better because you found meaning amongst other things, not to be insensitive and skate over the Robert thing. And once again, just acknowledging the gratitude for you to share. If I can really bring it in, one of the things I want to do with this channel too is, or this YouTube is to say, how does doing this change our outer world? And were you able to process your brother? How did that look in the outer world? Did you slowly wind down your practice of plumbing while you process, or you just found greater meaning in other things or purpose, or is it
I
okay to
mean, yeah, it's totally okay to ask. I mean, I built the plumbing business up to a point, and then I had a manager running it for me. And then we hit like I kind of like built it up and built it up. And then we had this really bad economic downturn. And then it kind of went under. And it partly went under because I wasn't going to be one of those people who would go back into the business and spend 80 hours a week to save it. It just, like I said, my heart wasn't in it in that way. It was had treated me well. It was good financially for me, but I wasn't going to spend 80. It's that kind of business. I had 10 trucks on the road, 14 employees, and none of them were like, they were all, you'd get plumbers, and then as soon as they got good, they would go start their own business. So it's not like I had long-term employees that were like, we didn't really have a family there. I mean, it was a good place to work. I hope it was a good place for
where were you
me.
geographically? You're
In Peoria, Vermont. Yeah, which is a pretty big business for a town that small. We had 10 trucks on the road. Everybody knew us. We had these, Saint Cyr Plumbing and Heating with a little halo over the Saint Cyr. was our little cute little logo. And yeah, I wasn't going to put 80 hours. So if I was going to put 80 hours into building a business, I was going to put 80 hours into building my dream practice and building the dream community that we had in those days, which is how I met you, organizing these retreats and organizing the logistics to get us all out there to British Columbia to do those retreats. And so I put all my energy into that. And I don't think it's skating over the thing with Robert. It's all interwoven, even to this day. Like I was telling you before we get on that I just spent a couple of days with my brother Stevie. And we ended up spending a good part of he just lost a son. We were talking about that. I was not just actually, it's 10 years ago. It feels like yesterday. And we were just talking about grief and loss and how to be with things that are just overwhelmingly devastating. So it all like totally interweaves for me. Even how I work with dreams, there's something about my experience with Robert dying made the way that I process things differently. I stopped caring about the kinds of things that most people care about. So you were shocked, when I was like, you run the show today. Like that comes from that experience with Robert, because my relationship with you is more important than the channel or you know what I mean? I'm not so focused on, I love it when we get lots of views and lots of comments. And I was telling you how I've been obsessing because the last video is doing really well. Look, 10 more views and 10, but at the end of the day, I think losing Robert at that young of an age just made me realize like every day could be our last day. And so, like you're talking about having fun, like let's have fun. Let's be in the fun. Let's be in the love. Let's be in the grief. And everything else either works out or it doesn't. But plumbing business went under. I wasn't happy about that, but I was like, okay, time to move on. My heart wasn't in it anyway. I had my manager, make as smooth a transition as we could for our employees, and we moved on to the next thing.
So any regrets, Bill? Any regrets switching to dream work as a business?
No, I mean, I like the plumbing, but no, I have no regret. I mean, it's financially challenging. I'll be honest about that. And I worry as a partner in a marriage, taking care of things financially. But even that, we're at a point where housing wise here in the States, I don't know, I think housing prices have gone crazy there too, but even more so maybe here, maybe not. The housing pressure here is insane, and rents and housing prices. And basically, through a little bit of money I got from my dad when my dad passed, and then friends loaned me money. Like we were able to get this house up in this little town in northern Maine. I could have never figured this plan out. But Sue's
And you
much
you
more.
married Sue,
I
who's a
married.
poet, and poets are known for their incredible income and opulence.
Exactly. The thing about Sue is that she has faith in things working out that has been a process for me. It's still a process for me to have the same kind of faith. So, like, on the whole, we decided to try to find a house. She was like, sure, we would find something somehow. And I said, okay, let's see what happens. She has much more faith in miracles than I do. I aspire to have the kind of faith that Sue has, honestly. She's a teacher in that way, in many ways, but in that way, very deeply. So she taught me as a parent to have faith. She taught me as a dream worker, and certainly as a partner, and around things like finding the house. She was just sure we'd find something, and here we are. So yeah, no regrets. I've left. I have a couple of marriages I left behind. I have regrets about that. You know, I have relationships from the past that I wish I'd handled better, that I have deep regret about. I have a son. I have a strange relationship from a son from my first marriage. I have deep, deep regrets about that. But I don't, I've done the best I can to, do better and just try to do better every day. Bring a little bit more love into the world, be with people in their pain and struggles. And that's a nice way to live. I have a rich, I don't have an economic richness, but I have a richness of people, of intimacy with people that I work with.
So, as much as you're willing to share, like, what is your clientele like now, roughly, if you're willing to, like, who, where, why, without giving away too much like, personal
You
information?
know, most of my clients are in the USA and Canada. Like, so most are in the USA, spread out across the country. Couple up in Canada from British Columbia to Toronto. And I have a handful of clients in Israel. And I've had clients in other parts of the world, but that's primarily it at this point. I have a couple of small classes that I do, and we're looking to launch a program. Right now, it's kind of a private program for some of the people that we're working with. We're on version Q or R or something of how we're going to do that, but
What's your
it's like
program called? What
it's people of the dream. I mean, our business is people of the dream. The idea is like how do we create a culture around the kind of work that we do with dreams? So there's the therapy part of it, but there's also the spiritual part of it. And one of the things that everybody who does this work is up against is like you do your session, but then you're out in the world, and it's a challenging reality out there in the world. Like a lot of what opens up for people in their dreams is hard to sustain in the outer world.
Yes.
You and I both have marriages where our partners are in the work and kind of doing personal and spiritual growth work. So that's a huge plus. But how to like beyond that, be create a culture, create a sense of community to keep that work going is a whole nother practice, which to me is the whole practice, because it's not about like doing a psychedelic trip and then it's not about the trip. It's about how the journey changes us and how we then bring that into the world.
And if I can excuse me, if I can clarify, but when you say in the work, I would argue it's a broader. I mean, you might sometimes we refer to dream work, which is the type of dream work we practice as the work, but truly it's some sort of self-reflective practice.
Right.
It is all the work is. It's almost
Right.
when I talk about acknowledging an inner journey and experience and an outer three dimension where I actually have a job. We actually need to make an income. We actually need to do this. But somebody who tries or to have a partner that tries to acknowledge both journeys. And I think religion at its best and churches at their best talk about these things and talk about, okay, what are we actually going through and how does this translate to the outer? I agree. It's not if you don't have a partner who can talk about this sort of stuff, it makes it a lot harder no matter what language you use or no matter what modality. So even though you say we're talking about dream work in this context, it can be any sort of psychological or spiritual work. I think there's this massive crossover
Yeah, I
to
think
work.
it's hard to do in isolation because you're trying to. I feel like we're up against a culture that doesn't encourage people to look at their inner worlds. We're in a culture that encourages people to ignore the inner worlds and focus on how much money, what do you do? And so, whether it's partners or friends or community of people, we all need people. I've learned that more and more over the years, how much I need people. I guess I'll just own it, like how much I need people to grow. So sometimes people will, because I don't really have a mentor. The mentor that you and I had at one point, and the relationship got very abusive for me, and I left that relationship behind. So since then, I have a practitioner that I work with, but we kind of almost co-practitioner with each other. And that's my teaching style at this point is how do we lean on each other as friends, as community to so that's a really long answer to I think your original question about the other program. That's the whole idea of people of the dream is can we again, and of course, like you said, it doesn't have to be about the dream. That's our
Right.
venue for the work. I guess in that way, it's not ultimately about the dream, but it's about that the work that we do in relationship to dreams.
Yes. And if for people who might watch this that aren't familiar, like we work with dreams in such a way that you don't absolutely know the meaning. I like to use the phrase that the world is filled with people telling you what to do, but there's nothing more powerful than you telling yourself what to do. So I've learned 1,000 ways to ask questions, and some of the metaphors are absolutely true, but you can't cling to them. So the way you and I tend to work with dreams, and our community tends to work with dreams, is by asking people questions and what's the feeling, and that's just a rough overview. And the Wikipedia, I think, has a reasonable definition of dream work as it is. If you Google dream work or something, it would be DreamWorks comes up as the corporation, but it's the type
The
of work
movie
that
company.
yeah, but it's usually, it's just how do we not absolutely know? And even I realize I pause a lot as I speak, and I was talking about this with my son. Like the more you know, the more you don't know, the more everything I say could be wrong. So even as I say it, or painful to rewatch these videos, like how do you speak about things where you don't know them absolutely? But this is why science is important. We try and quantify things. You try and get numbers and studies and data to justify what you know. And it's been incredibly hard with dream work in particular. But your numbers are so small, and the scientific world
Right.
really values large n values, large numbers. How many numbers were in your study? It's like, well, so and so got their marriage back together. So and so is able to find intimacy. So and so got work again. So and so. Like these are numbers that we work with are so small that no scientific data can. So it goes under the radar of the scientific community a lot of the time how important self-reflective work can do. But every therapist, psychologist, like everybody knows how important and powerful it can be in transforming people and their communities and their relationships. And for my work as a family doctor, emergency room doctor, just if somebody's not at their best, it's going to affect their health and likely their family's health and possibly their community's health and on and on and on and on. So part of the reason I do this work, inner work, and even this channel, just trying to find words to what it is we do and how what we're experiencing on an inner level can affect what happens in our life and our quality of life and our health and our relationships, which I do want to segue into recurring dreams. Yeah, my friend and colleague Marlo said he appreciates the dialogue, and can we talk specifically about recurring dreams? And if I was to sum it up, and I mean, my short answer to a lot of things about dreams or inner worlds is I don't know. I don't know, but my experience of things oftentimes is a recurring dream is an exclamation mark. It's like screaming, "Pay attention to me!" And if it's happening every night, then it's trying to get through. It's like saying, "Will you please acknowledge this dream?" But the number of people who I've worked with, one dream, one recurring dream, it's often scary, um, and the pattern breaks right there. But there's
Right.
people that lose sleep every night. There's people that are afraid to go to bed, afraid to go to sleep because of this dream. And if they book one session with me, it's astounding how many people the pattern breaks. And oftentimes the dream isn't exactly the same. It's subtle if they'll say it's the same dream, but if you push the people, it's like, no, this was a little bit different. This was a little bit different.
Yeah.
But the feeling is the same. The fear is often the same. And if you just help somebody process and ask questions, if they're just able to share that and not be alone with it, it's amazing how many times just boom, it stops. Like that dream stops. And the therapeutic value of that, like I talked in our first session, how, I had a dream I was fighting in the Coliseum, and I brought that energy into the operating room when I'm being an anesthetist. It's like, I'm agitated, I'm on edge that whole time. But if you literally aren't sleeping, sleep deprivation is horrible. And if part of that can be helped by stopping these nightmares, we can
Yeah.
help with that. And there's different modalities and lucid dreaming modalities, but like you don't need to lucid, you don't need to do anything. In a way, you just need to share them with somebody who's not going to judge you, who can help you process and let you go on a tangent. And oftentimes people will tell a story. They'll say some version. I don't know why I'm telling you this story, whether they actually say words like that, but
Yeah.
there'll be
Yeah.
a way that there'll be. I would argue it maybe it's a feeling memory from the past that came out in this, and it boom, it's gone. That dream never happens again. So many horrible things have happened to so many of us too that and people belittle it because you kind of have to get by in this world and to get on with life because life is hard. Ultimately, hard choices, hard decisions, hard to get up in the morning sometimes. But people don't acknowledge just how hard and just acknowledging it and giving permission to say, oh, yeah, well, that was really hard. Are you with me, Bill?
I'm with you totally. I mean, I think it overlaps with the conversation about fear because I think so much of our challenges around being with fear have to do with the fact that we're alone with it. And just having a session or having somebody with you kind of walk you through and be with you in the fear. So I think in some ways you're talking about the recurring dream, but I also think there's kind of a bigger issue maybe related to what Beth was asking about just how do I move through my fears?
Right,
Particularly given
right.
that so
Beth
many
said
of these are,
specifically, do fear as a topic. Do fear. That's and there's a huge crossover because most recurring dreams involve fear. Most, not
yeah.
all, in my experience.
Yeah. I mean,
Sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
no, it's all good. I think that in general, like any feeling that's difficult for somebody to be with usually has to do with the belief that they have to be with it alone. So, one of the huge differences between a feeling that becomes kind of like a trauma feeling, one that's overwhelming and I'm not able to process and becomes kind of problematic, whether it's anger or fear or pain, has to do with the way that we're taught in this culture to be with feelings on our own or to just ignore them completely, which is another way of saying, just bury it somewhere inside of you. And so when someone has a recurring dream, it's because there's something in their psyche. And they have done some neuroscience around this in dreams and how dreams access parts of the brain that we're not conscious of during the day. So when we carry overwhelming fears, we can manage that during the day in a way that we can't always manage it at night because there's this gating process that the conscious mind uses to kind of bury certain memories away that for better or worse, I personally think it's for the better, but I understand that for some people in the short run, it can be for the worse. Those gates are not so locked up when we're dreaming. And so the things that we've managed in our day-to-day lives tend to come bubbling up in our dreams. And if there's something specific that we haven't dealt with that we may need to for health, emotional, spiritual health reasons, yeah, it'll come knocking at the door over and over and over again until we can be with it on a conscious level in our day-to-day life. And often that means even if they don't come to one of us and do a session, if people at least had people in their lives, like I know you do this with some of your friends where you email dreams to each other and talk to each other about your dreams, like if we had places where we could share our experiences, whether it's the dreams or other experiences, it would be a different world. And again, like this is, like I was saying earlier, this all comes back to my brother because everything that I was taught when my brother died is you just have to move on. And I was like, no. I was just like, no. and like to say it was emphatic is an understatement, but I didn't know how to deal with even just like, so that was an example. I didn't know how to deal with the anger that I felt. And then I would have dreams that were violent or dreams where I was being angry. Like one of my early dreams that I was a helper person, right? Like we talked about this last time. I was like the caretaker, the helper, but my dreams, like I had one dream where I smashed this guy's skull open with a rock. And I was like, My practitioner's like, got some anger, Bill? And I'm like, no, I don't have any anger at all. But then feeling into it, I realized, like, yeah, like there was this anger about all the years of being told that I should just forget about my brother, and even anger at my brother, which is like, so how do you deal with that? You've lost someone that you love. It's like the biggest grief of your life, and you're angry at them for leaving. To the intellectual mind, that feels like the stupidest thing. How could you be angry but on some other level, on a more emotional level, like, of course I'm angry he left. Like, I just didn't want him to leave. But it was 20, like literally 20 years. I never had a chance I never talked to anybody about these things because I had no idea what to do with it all. And I didn't want to have violent dreams, but they ended up being great dreams for me. Like, I got to look at my own anger. I got to look at, some of the dark side of my caretaking behavior and how I was trying to control things and make things better for other people because of my own struggles with what was happening for me. So,
Anger. There's so much I wanna say about or reflect. Thank you, Bill. The anger thing, just even coming from parts of Canada, there's a bit of an apology ethos that we try and pretend like we're not angry, but just a good hockey game or an elbows up is I still play ice hockey, and the number of us that just gotta temper your anger because it's like, "Okay, we're just for fun." This is, bring it down, but how anger is a healthy emotion. I love that Inside Out cartoon movie that got so
yeah,
popular
it was
one of the
brilliant.
5 main emotions was anger and disgust. We can talk about why is disgust there. That's a huge one. There's another topic talking about disgust in dreams and how important it is for building boundaries and having healthy relationships, that you need to process anger, and it does come out in dreams, and you'll see it. I've worked with myself and other people. So you're not angry, eh? And but giving permission for people permission to have anger is it's funny. I don't know how uniquely Canadian that is, but certainly there's a peacekeeping mentality, and amongst even some people, there's I'm largely surrounded by people that follow a Christian tradition or a Buddhist tradition, a little bit smaller populations, but that sometimes amongst the Buddhist tradition, it seems that, well, acceptance and like save the worm. And like there's these stories
Yeah,
of Buddhism as most peaceful and try to convince somebody that some anger is okay and it's coming out in their dreams, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. And is helpful because if you don't acknowledge it, it's in there. It's coming out as at worst passive aggressive, which I have been at my worst, and I can see it. And
you and me both,
I'm not
brother.
proud to say
You and me
it.
both.
I'm sure my wife would be smirking right now if she watches this. It's like, yeah, yeah, buddy. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I do think that that's the stereotype about Canadians because I think it's probably maybe a little bit even more endemic in Canadian culture. But I do think in general, for good reason, we don't, and this goes back to the thing you're always talking about language. So for most people, when you say anger, they immediately equate it with with violence or abuse. So on that level, yeah, none of us want to be angry. If our association with angry is somebody being shot or killed or beating up their child or their partner or screaming at somebody or berating somebody, then but we're using the same word anger for abuse and violence that like last
yes,
time you were talking about anger just in terms of having boundaries, and
right,
that's two different understandings. I mean, part of the problem with most feelings, and this is true for fear also, is we don't have a language that sorts out in the difference between fear that's just I feel fear in my body or I feel anger in my body versus I'm scared so I can't go to work or I'm angry and so I'm going to swear at somebody and be hurtful to somebody. is an action that we take in relationship to fear, or I'm sorry, anger. Or in the case of fear, we get paralyzed or intimidated, or we're anxious and our blood pressure goes up. But there's a whole nother, it's almost like we need different words for fear that's really about just like, can I just be in the vulnerability of life? You talked earlier about not knowing or not understanding or not having the science to back this all up. There's a certain vulnerability and fear to not know everything, to not understand everything. But that's not something any of us are taught. Like, you can be afraid and still, and it's not like, then it goes to the other extreme, right? Like in America, there's this whole thing of be afraid and do it anyway. But then it's always about the doing. It's always about the, you can go mountain climbing even though you're afraid. It's never, you're allowed to be vulnerable. You're allowed to be in fear and feel, oh, I need help with this fear, or I need support, or I need to, sometimes in my fear, I'll turn to God, or I'll turn to Sue or a partner or a friend. That's a different thing than having fear that's paralyzing. And the same
Yes.
thing with the anger. It's like a different, we attach every feeling to an action. So love becomes associated with sex or taking care of people, or being something versus having a different kind of love. It's just, like, can we learn to just, you were talking last time about the somatic piece. Can we learn to actually just be in our bodies with these feelings? Can we learn to just be alive? Like, sometimes I'll tease my clients, they'll say, I feel like I'm too sensitive. And I'm like, yeah, you're too alive. It's such a terrible thing that you're so alive. Could you stop being so alive? But that's basically what we're taught.
Yes. Yes. And what is healthy fear and like life. I was it who's it? I think it's a Mark Twain quote or attributed to Mark Twain that courage is not the absence of fear. It's the mastery of it, or some such quote, something similar. But how to acknowledge, yeah, it's scary. It's scary. You imagine, or to be like a child, which is why the cartoon part of that, all those, is
Yeah.
particularly good. If a child's boundary is crossed, and you might think sexual boundaries, but personal boundaries, emotional boundaries, it's healthy for that child to get angry, and
Yeah.
that'll show up in dreams where you're not angry or angry. If you didn't have a chance, like how does the parent get to parent, but the child to have a voice at the same time? And where is this happy medium? If you didn't get a chance to speak truth to power or to get angry at somebody who crossed a boundary, which is just so incredibly common as you grow up, because it's going to happen. You don't necessarily need to do anything, but you do need to process that anger. Otherwise, we get in patterns, and fear dreams will often say how we they'll often be a story in the accessory part, little other parts of the dream that say how a scary situation where we didn't get to use our voice or didn't get to be who we were,
Yeah.
or a boundary was crossed. And it's terrifying to be vulnerable. It's terrifying to be a child a lot of the time in this world. Like, it's
Yeah.
constantly, there's top down, there's something that's threatening. Uh, and it's scary, but how do you acknowledge the fear and move past it and still get up and go to school or do your thing or
Yeah.
have your voice, and then put up a boundary to those who cross your boundaries, but yet know you actually have to do some things in this world.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's a practice, right? I think part of the problem is we're trying to do something that we weren't necessarily taught how to do.
Yes.
So to like be in the world with your feelings, be in your body in the world in this way, is not something that I was taught. It's something that, like, we're out in the wilderness. But that's, I
Yeah.
think, where the community piece comes in. It's like, that's where, one, I think if we can accept that, then we don't have to be so ashamed of the struggle around it.
Yeah.
Part of the hugest problems for me in most personal and spiritual growth work is there's all these kinds of maxims, or this idea that if you just did this, then everything would be fine. And I don't think it really works that way. I think it's a life practice for us all to learn to be with ourselves and be with each other And on the more spiritual side, if you're comfortable with the language of God or just consciousness in general, to like be with ourselves and the world in this other way is something I think that we have to admit that it's a learning process. And part of what's great about dreams is they become like a workplace, a lab, a playground for what would it be like if I didn't have shame, for example, like about that dream where I smashed that guy's skull in, like like I obviously don't, there's a moral issue there of like, I don't want to be hurtful to people. And to the extent that I've done that, I guess there could be a healthy kind of shame. But in general, I don't want to just be like, oh my God, that's bad. I don't want to like moralize it. And it's like, oh, I have to like, because that just feeds into the cycle. Then you just bury the anger more, and then that's where people explode. Like, there's never been a mass shooting in the States where they don't interview a neighbor afterwards. And it's like, oh, I'm so surprised but it's because people bury it so much, they create this whole persona, and then the anger builds and builds and builds. And then I would find myself exploding. But part of it was because I just didn't know how to be with my anger. Mean, Sue and I had to have an agreement because we were both the kind of people who would bury it so much that it was hard to work out issues because we would tiptoe around the anger. And we had to have an agreement, like, yeah, just be a little messy, Sue and Bill. Just be a little bit little bit messy. This is probably her idea. She often led in these sorts of things of like, let's just commit to being messy, and if we do something hurtful, we apologize. Like, I trust you that you don't mean to be hurtful. But that's again not something we were just taught all anger is bad and you just bury it.
Right. And can I spin off that in a way that
Please.
there's but people love to categorize like the head, which shows up in a dream, like just talk about images and metaphors, but there's some truth here. The head, it demands, we demand, science demands something to be true, good or bad. Like it's better, it should be this way or this way. But playing with the metaphor, we often know the head, or I work in an emergency room. Somebody with schizophrenia or delusions, they'll want to bash their head or put a tinfoil helmet on, or do
I know
they
that
know it's the
feeling.
head where things are coming from. So metaphorically, sometimes in a dream, when the head gets trauma or that you get shot or gets bashed, it's getting out of your head and into your heart and into the rest of your body. So putting a potential, another positive spin on that dream, it's Bill getting out of his head and overthinking
Right.
things.
Smashing the part of myself that's in my head. I
Right.
love
Right. Because we can be incredibly hard on ourselves is a pattern that we've both seen how humans as a species, like once you get vulnerable, you can talk a big talk, but we can be incredibly hard on ourselves. And it's like, this is a bad Bill dream that you smashed a head. But, a part of it is Bill needs
I
to
was
get out of
definitely
his head.
embarrassed by it.
Yeah. But trying to put a positive, like it's funny, even positive, negative, this language, can we just not judge and put a label one way or another, but explore in such a way that, oh, this is another way of Bill's processing things.
I love that. Thank you for that. I've never, in all my
You're
years
welcome.
of like sitting with that dream, and it's been an issue for me, like how to be with my anger. So it's a dream that I've thought about, and I've because this is the thing about dreams, and this is the part of the playground thing, is it's not necessarily literal.
Right.
So for me, the healthy part of the whole process is like, okay, if there is anger there that's like that can be abusive. And I think I did have a kind of anger that was abusive. So it's good for me to process that. But I think it's also important to be like, yeah, maybe part of the abusiveness comes out of the fact that you're so in your head and you just need to like smash through that. Like having that kind of balance around our relationship to dreams, and the meaning of dreams is really really important. And also there's the context of the dream of like, which my person at the time just had no kind of, because we kind of pathologize things in those days. So that it's like, that was your pathology, that anger's your pathology. So it all just kind of, even just the context of my fear of this man, because there were some kids there and I'd asked him to leave and I was kind of watching these kids. And it's like, well, where does that fear come from? Maybe this is why, like, when you asked about the fear, I kind of went over to the anger and then back to the fear. Because for me, they're often really ends of the same spectrum, or I guess in my own experience, It's like when you're a cornered animal, it looks angry from the outside, but inside it's a kind of terror. And I don't think I spent enough time originally kind of exploring. It's like, well, why were you so scared at this point that this person that you felt like you had to go to that extreme of a level?
Right.
And,
So being with this helps you be in the world or face scary things. Like some of the people I know or patients I know with chronic illnesses, they're afraid to go to the emergency room because they'll be labeled this. They're a drug seeker. They've got this problem, and they're afraid the nurse or the doctor is going to judge them. And it's scary. It's terrifying to be with that fear. But if you face that fear and use your voice in a healthy way, or I think it was in the Vander Kolk book there, he says like people are just used to being on the losing side uh, of an interaction. It's like they're afraid to go into an interaction because they'll end up on the losing side once again. It's scary. So learning to be with fear and even the talk around it, like play therapist or like these, they'll know exactly it's similar, or the no bad parts, that form of reflection that's out now. That, sorry, I forget the name of it. The, what is it? The guy who wrote the
the
No Bad Parts book. What's it called?
internal family systems.
Yes. Internal family systems. How do you talk about these inner and outer conflicts in such a way, almost magically it seems you're able to be more effective in your life and assert and get your needs met in relationships in the world once you can be with that fear.
Yeah.
And it just kind of turns out that way. I can tell somebody that, but it's better to help them through it and be with them and think, oh, okay, we just like dealt with a fear dream and I'm still here. And that was scary, but I'm still here and I'm not alone and I'm not being judged. And I mean, the huge thing I wanted to speak of when you're saying this, how do you, which is a whole nother topic I'd like to do one of these YouTubes on, is being alone and or not being alone, or who's with you in the dream. And it's amazing what you can do. And I'll repeat this because I do want to do another session on this. But if you, like, I find the people I know that are Christian, which we happen to be in a very Christian part of the world here, and it's the people who truly feel they walk with God or walk with Christ, like truly in their heart. Oh
Yeah.
my God, they're bulletproof. they're not
Yeah.
they're not afraid of much. I mean, there's, you can call yourself Christian or call yourself Buddhist or whatever, but the people who truly feel it, wow. Um, and it shows up in dreams if you're alone or if you had to face things alone or if you had
Yeah.
company, and helping people through that, massive. I'd say my two scariest dream themes, one of them only happened once, which was I went to one end of a fence in my dream and I turned around and was looking for the way out and I went to the other end of the fence and I couldn't, and I went to one end of the fence and it was just like this straight chain link fence, and the feeling was I was caught in a loop. Absolutely terrifying. But I was also alone. And then I've got a wrath of thousands of dreams where I was just alone. I was facing difficult things, but I was doing it alone over and over and over. And when finally my dreams opened up,
Were you physically alone in the dream, or just like not in connection with people?
correct. And but this is where it helps. A lot of the time there was actually somebody there and I didn't know how to ask for help, or I didn't know they were a positive presence, or in Carl Jung's world, the animus and anima, masculine or feminine, mentor or elder, or like however
Yeah.
you can play with metaphors. But once you capture that feeling, which I would argue, I'm just more familiar with the Christian religion because I know the language of it, and the Buddhist religion. But once you have captured that feeling that you're not alone, wow, the world becomes a much easier place to navigate with courage. But you can say all these words and they don't really mean anything in the head. They're just words. But if you feel it, it's completely different. If you feel going into the world, but it's
Yeah.
amazing the fear dreams and being alone with them. And if I just ask people two questions, it's like, well, were you alone in the dream? And if they'll tell, have you ever felt alone in your life? Or did you have to face this alone? Or how old were you in the dream? And did you feel alone at that point in their life? It's amazing what opens up in terms of a story. And a lot of people felt alone. It's like you said, your parents had, well, how many kids? Like,
Eight kids, eight
there's
kids.
only so much you can be there for any one child. Like, it's almost inevitable that, like, as a kid, you would have to feel like you were alone, if not alone, if you literally weren't alone, and abuse happens and boundaries get crossed and horrible things happen. And yeah, I think Brent van der Kolk in his book, The Body Keeps the Score. He talks about two, a girl who's raped, whose mother is kind of just dismissive, and a girl who's raped, and a mother who actually says, "This was horrible." It's like, let's try and take this person to justice. Like, I give this person a hug. One will have PTSD, the other one won't. And it's not quite that black and white, but if you get the sense that somebody was there for you in the world and can help you through the hard times, because hard times will happen, it's far less traumatizing.
Yeah.
You can move through it. And my experience of that is true. And it comes up over and over in dream questionings. And if you can just help somebody process and or acknowledge that that was really hard going through that alone, and if they can just put voice to that, they seem to energetically shift and their life changes for the better, for lack of a better term. They're more willing to face, they're more able to face the world, or that sometimes it's just going to the grocery store. Sometimes people are so hurt. I mean, to come for help, to get up and go to their job, uh, just depression. My goodness, people, anxiety. If we can help people not be alone with that, I could keep talking a million different ways here, but thoughts, Bill?
Well, I think it's, yeah, I could talk it a million different ways too, because I think it's the most, I mean, it goes back to everything we're talking about fear and anger and love and recurring dreams. Like it's all PTSD on some level is about isolation. I mean, maybe not always. I mean, I don't want to downplay someone who's been through something terrible and gotten support and still not been able to recover. But for the most part, the whole nature of the trauma cycle is you're meant to dissociate until you get back with your people. Trauma, the dissociation cycle is all about what's happening for me in the moment is too overwhelming. So someone will be physically or sexually abused and they'll literally leave their body, and they'll have memories of seeing themselves being abused from above their body is a very common and kind of classical dissociation symptom. But yeah, if you the whole point of that isn't for the psyche to stay separate from itself forever. The whole point is like, because the experience someone is going through is so overwhelming, it helps them survive the moment, hopefully until they make it back to people who can be with them, and then they can process the feelings they were unable to process. So this is where the recurring dream thing comes in, and why it's so hard for people, particularly with recurring nightmares, is because most of us feel like there's not somebody there to be with us on a deeper way with those nightmares. And it's not really the nightmare that's the issue. It's whatever's triggering the nightmare in the first place. The whole nature of those experiences is somebody wasn't there for us in the first place. So the idea that I could go to somebody, a friend or somebody else, and be with them with this nightmare and be with them with the feelings that are behind that is by the very of the nature of the nightmare counterintuitive. Because the
Mhm.
whole reason we're having the nightmare is because there wasn't somebody there in the first place. And the whole
Right.
reason it's a nightmare is because of the isolation. If you went through I mean, there are famous stories of people who went through the Holocaust and somehow managed to keep their psyche intact because they had people in the camps with them, and they had people afterwards to kind of like help them maintain their traditions and their lineages and the love they felt. And that's not to downplay the horror of what anybody goes through in any kind of a situation, but it's a totally different experience. I had a Vietnam vet friend who, he said, it's gonna, people always think it's the most counterintuitive thing in the world, but when he was in Vietnam, it was like the first time in his life where he had people at his back. So he had like this brotherhood in Vietnam. So it was this weird sort of split for him, both the like horrors of going through what he went through in Vietnam, but also like he kind of missed the like band of brothers thing because it was like the only time in his life where he knew he had somebody at his back. And
Right.
I think part of the challenge of working with dreams is how do we create a culture and a community for us to be with each other with what comes up for us? I mean, I think that's the challenge, whether it's about dreams, like you keep saying over and over again, it's not just about the dreams. I think it's the challenge of the culture. We're getting more and more isolated, more, it plays out politically as these divisions. You okay if I talk a little bit more in relationship to my experience with my brother this weekend?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was interesting being with him and talking about his son and talking about me losing Robert. And we'd never had these conversations before. This is the first time. I'm 64 years old, he's 70, and it's the first time in our life that we went on this walk. It was just the two of us. And one of the challenges with my family is I come from a big family. So often I'm at family events and it's like a pack of dogs or wolves or whatever. So it's always like all these people. And if you get in a few sentences, you're lucky. But it's the first time. I mean, Robert died 45 years ago and Brian died sometime over 10 years ago now. And it's the first time we've had a chance where he was listening to me about what my experience was like losing Robert. And I got to be with him listening to his experience of what it was like to lose Brian. And, a couple of times he would, I think people feel bad about being upset or whatever. And I was like, no, no, no. Like, I want to hear this. Like, this is real. This is what I live for. I don't, I don't want to be lost in the grief, but I want to hear what's in people's heart. It was the best visit I've ever had with my brother. I felt a kind of love with him that I just have never had the opportunity to go that deep with him. And so you can have all these siblings and not have the time and space or know how to talk to them until you're 64 years old. Uh, Speaking of things being a lifelong practice. Um, that's, yeah, very personal example of kind of breaking through that isolation. And we come from kind of different, I talked about my politics last time, and I'm more progressive, and he comes from a more traditional conservative background. And, we'll sometimes like get into kind of things around our politics. But even with that, like I did better, like just take a breath, Bill, and listen. Like, well, why do you think what you think? Can you just listen to them? Can you not be defensive? And can you share why something's important to you without always going to the thing out there? But can you get underneath that and break through the isolation is not something I think that's so easy to do in our culture.
And to put like people can be to this theme, people can be incredibly hard on themselves. Like something that you've said and that I like to tell people about the dissociation or how you left your body. It's like, oh, well, that's okay. That's how you needed to survive at the time. Don't view this as a negative. View this as a you're resilient and still here because you needed to dissociate. That was a horrible trauma. What's that?
It's what got you here to where we are today.
Right. So it's people will use no end of reasons to be hard on themselves in my experience, but that yeah, you had this thing and you didn't want to deal with it, or people will have a dream with a box under the bed, or a box they don't want to open, or a door they don't want to open, and they know what's behind that door. Oftentimes they don't tell me, and I have no idea what's behind that door, but they often know what's behind that door, and it's not for me to put. But it's amazing the number of times the door is unlocked, or the dream will give them keys. I can't count the number of dreams, or people have been given
Not subtle.
keys. It's not subtle. It's like, I didn't make this up. It's not me doing it, but the dream's given you the keys, literally the keys in the dream. And I don't even know what this is all about. but I know they've got something locked up, and they'll look at me like I'm some sort of a magician. It's like I don't know anything. It's your dream, but they'll know. But then they're hard on themselves. It's like, you know what, you lock that away for a reason. That's what got you here. That's what got you to survive. But the dream is offering you a a modality of opening up these things if you want to. You do have the keys. It's a very playful, light metaphor. If you want to open this door, you actually do have the keys to open this door. Oh, there's one other thing I wanted to talk about, just tangent back a bit
Go,
on the
go,
alone
go.
thing. For the community, and I do know bits, I mean, I'm in British Columbia. There is more acceptance of substances for better and for worse here, but the psychedelic community that deals with psilocybin or other things, that people
Yeah.
will know that I had like the ketamine for therapy program here for a bit, and then they will say, well, should I just pick up some mushrooms? It's like, no. I mean, do what you want. It's a free world, but if you're honestly asking my opinion and you have any choice in the matter, get a trusted friend, a trusted this, have an intention, do what Michael Pollan says, like just relating to our alone thing. For God's sakes, don't try and do this alone. And maybe it'll help somebody, maybe it won't. And who am I to say? I don't want to infringe on your freedoms. Do what you want. However, when you do these things with a trusted friend or alone or do a proper ceremony, which I think every therapist or every true practitioner that wants to. Vancouver Island is one of Vancouver Island University is getting this fledgling psychedelic
Yeah.
assisted therapy program, which is fabulous. I did a little talk on dreams at one of their things. I need to get back a hold of them because I admire what they're doing. It's like, how do we formalize this, do it in a supportive way, science backed, and get tangible results, but to branch to our prior conversation, not do it alone. Just don't do it alone. Do it with people who will be supportive and non-judgmental, because you can get fire hosed with a lot of past traumatic things, both painful, and people have godlike experiences with psychedelics. But to have
That can be
somebody to
overwhelming
post,
too.
that can be absolutely overwhelming. And how do you leave that and not just crave a next psychedelic trip, which sometimes does happen. And then
Yeah.
people spiral, oh, that's
Yeah.
my God. This is how, like, no, 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 no. You actually have a day job and a relationship and kids or whatever it is you've got going that are priorities for you. And don't, just because you've got some insights through this, have a practice or a community that helps ground you in it. And you see people getting lost in any sort of tradition, from religions to psychedelics to dream work to whatever. This
Yeah,
this can
for
be your
sure.
god. This is the way through. This is, and they lose perspective and priorities on the other parts of their life, right? I could keep going on that too, but are you, I know you're with me on this. I know you're.
I am with you. I have a client, it's on the more religious side, and they have an expression, there is no God but God. The bottom line is that integration matters. Being with other people matters. Integration matters. Making dreams into God, making mushrooms into God, making anything into God. It's not the point. The point is, how do we live in this world? And we're finishing with some technical difficulties here. Although I hope the main bulk of what we've done is good enough to put out there, because it's been a fun conversation for me.
It
It's been
has been a
fun.
fun conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, touching. Someone wrote and said how touched they were by these conversations. And I feel the same way, actually. It's really touching for me. I think it's a good practice for me of like breaking the isolation. I love that we're calling what we do now the Dream Bros. I love having a dream bro. Yeah.
Fun. It is
Yeah.
fun, Bill. I do feel scattered, like the scientific part of my brain, but we didn't stick to a nice agenda. It's
Yeah, we'll see.
next time we'll stick to an agenda.
I'm a hard person to do that with. I'll confess that I'm not the best at that sort of skill set. So I can work on that. If at some point you want to be a little bit more structured, we could do that.
Well, I tried, which is good. I tried to ground it, but we'll pick some of the people, and the feedback is appreciated if anybody watches this and says, "Would you talk about X or Y or this thing or that thing with respect to
Or
dreams?"
send us
But
a
I
dream.
or
Send
send
us
us a
a
dream,
dream.
and we can say, yeah, how we work with people's dreams if they're willing. How about that? Good place to stop, Bill?
This is great. You did a great job. That was great for me. It's more relaxing for me to feel like, oh, Jake's in charge, so I don't have to. I can relax a little bit more, which is nice.
Beautiful. Love
Thank
it.
you, and thank you to everybody who's stuck with us through this all, through whatever technical difficulties. If you like the channel, please like, comment, and share all those usual things. And yeah, until next time,
Till next time.
see you, Jake.
See you, Bill.